Stay with us until the end to learn how you can build wealth by investing in art today. A great upheaval had struck the kingdom. A child of noble lineage had been born, and the wise mystics warned the king that this child would rise to become a slayer of chiefs, destined to rule the entire island of Hawaii. Fearing this prophecy, King Alapai ordered assassins to kill the child. However, the boy's mother, a clever chiefess, secretly arranged for him to be raised by another family in hiding. For 5 years, the boy evaded this death sentence, until the king eventually welcomed him back to the royal court. He grew strong, tall, and full of brooding power. He bore the divine mark of prophecy and was named Kamehameha, meaning the lonely one. After the death of King Alapai, King Kalaniapu ascended the throne, but now he was on his deathbed, and the question of succession loomed large. Jealous chiefs fought for control of lands, and only a few years had passed since the first white men had arrived on these shores. The most capable leader to take the throne was Kamehameha, the king's strong nephew. However, the king intended to pass the throne to his eldest son, Kawala'o, while granting Kamehameha some land and naming him the keeper of Ku, the war god. The religion of the islands had its roots in the traditions of the legendary Polynesian explorers who had discovered and settled the archipelago centuries earlier. From this heritage blossomed the spirit of aloha, a harmonious force rooted in kindness and familial love. The people developed a profound connection to the land, from the vibrant coral reefs to the towering, dormant volcanoes. The gods infused the world with mana, a sacred energy that flowed through all things, nature, prayers, and people alike. But mana was not evenly distributed. Those of noble blood held it in abundance, and thus kings and chiefs claimed the right to enforce kapu, spiritual codes of conduct. These laws dictated that commoners bowed to chiefs, prohibited women from dining with men, and forbade women from consuming sacred foods such as pork, bananas, or coconuts. The penalty for violating the kapu was death, and from the remains of those sacrificed or slain, one could absorb the mana of their enemies. Denied his rightful place on the throne, Kamehameha rebelled against the king. He killed a defiant noble, taking the mana for himself. With Kalaniapu dead, his vengeful, disinherited son Kua attacked Kamehameha's lands, killing several of his people and offering their bodies as sacrifices to his half-brother, the new king Kawala'o. In response, Kamehameha mustered his chiefs for battle. Warriors fought fiercely with jagged clubs and barbed spears, and on the battlefield, King Kawala'o was struck by a stone. One of Kamehameha's warriors rushed to him with a sharp-toothed dagger and slit his throat. Now Kamehameha ruled over half the island. Kua fled south, swearing revenge, and for years, he and the other chiefs held firm against Kamehameha's efforts to expand further. The lines of battle remained stalwart, yet something was needed to break the stalemate. Enter Simon Metcalf, an American trader seeking vengeance. Some of the native people had killed one of his crew members in retaliation for Metcalf's flogging of a noble chief over a perceived insult. In response, the American captain anchored his ship off the coast of Maui at the village of Aliawalo, called out warmly to trade, and when 100 unarmed men and women paddled out with fruits and flowers, he ordered his cannons to fire upon them. After the massacre, Metcalf fled the area, known as Screaming Bay. He had come to the islands to meet his son, Thomas, who soon arrived in his own vessel to trade in Hawaii, unaware of his father's brutal actions. The Hawaiians captured the ship, forced the crew overboard, and beat them to death with paddles. They spared only one, Isaac Davis, for his courageous spirit. Along with John Young, another captured member of Metcalf's crew, they were brought before King Kamehameha. The king, calm and composed, offered the prisoners a choice. They could face death, or he would grant them lavish homes, feasts, and several beautiful wives, provided they agreed to remain in his service as advisors. They were to train his soldiers in the use of the muskets and cannons from the captured ship. Young and Davis accepted, serving the king loyally thereafter. They helped broker trade with American and British ships, which had started to frequent the islands in recent years. One of the king's trusted courtiers, Kaena, had even traveled to China and America. Through these trade connections, Kamehameha acquired precisely what he sought: vast quantities of guns and cannons to use against his enemies. The great Kahekili ruled Maui and had slain many in his conquest of Oahu, where he resided in a house made from the bones of the chiefs who defied him. It was rumored that Kahekili was the true father of Kamehameha, but it made no difference. Kamehameha invaded Maui, battling against Kahekili's son, Kalani Kupule. Young and Davis manned the cannons, and the Hawaiians killed so many that the river ran red with blood. However, Kamehameha did not conquer Maui at that time. In his absence, his old enemy Kua ravaged his kingdom on Hawaii. Kamehameha returned with his powerful gunners, forcing Kua's army to retreat into the desolate ashlands. There, a volcanic eruption and a storm of poisonous gases killed hundreds of Kua's men, but the victory was short-lived. Armed with guns of his own, Kahekili formed a coalition of islands to oppose Kamehameha. His invasion fleet struck the sacred temples along the northern shores of Hawaii. But Kamehameha met them at sea, and with muskets and cannons, his forces scattered the invaders. This island could not remain divided for long. Kamehameha invited Kua to make peace, and the weary rebel came forth in a canoe. Above them stood the king's new lava stone temple atop the hill of the whale, with Kamehameha and his warriors waiting on the shore. Kua, suspicious, began to cut his own flesh to make himself unfit for sacrifice. But the king called out to reassure him, "Rise and come here, that we may know each other." Kua, hesitant but trusting, stepped onto the beach, only to be met by Kamehameha and his warriors, who killed him and his party. The king took their bodies to the temple, stripped the flesh from their bones, and harvested their mana. With that, Kamehameha ruled supreme over the island of Hawaii. Kahekili died in 1794 and was succeeded by his son, Kalani Kupule, on Oahu. Kalani then conquered Maui and sought to seize British trade ships for his fleet. Kamehameha had no intention of making enemies of the outsiders. After skillfully negotiating an alliance with British diplomats, they sent an army of 10,000 warriors to aid him. The forces overran Maui and continued their advance to Oahu, where they faced Kaena, a traitor to Kamehameha, who commanded the Oahu defenders. A cannonball shot through Kaena, and the Oahu forces retreated to their stronghold at Nuanupali, a cliffside overlook. The blare of war shells echoed across the battlefield as Kamehameha's warriors stormed the mountain, shooting and lancing all who stood in their way. At last, the Oahu army was trapped, with nowhere to go but a 1,000-foot drop to the valley below. The men of Kamehameha slaughtered many where they stood and forced hundreds more over the precipice. The valley floor became a sea of mangled bodies, and Kamehameha's warriors began beheading the fallen so their mana could pass to the king. However, the body of Kalani Kupule was not among the dead. Months later, he was discovered wounded in the mountains. He was brought before Kamehameha at the Hill of the Whale and sacrificed. With that, all the islands of Hawaii bowed to Kamehameha, except Kauai and its neighboring island, Niihau. Kamehameha then launched an invasion of Kauai, but the fleet was caught in a violent tempest. Some survivors managed to reach the shores of Kauai, only to be captured by fierce warriors who sacrificed them. Hawaiian warfare was ruthless. No quarter was given, not even to civilians. One boy recalled how Kamehameha's marauders overran his village and killed his parents. As he tried to escape with his infant brother, they speared the child. Yet, in a turn of compassion, Kamehameha was presented with a group of civilians who had, years earlier, defended their village by breaking a paddle over his head. The king pardoned them and declared the law of the splintered paddle. See to it that our aged, our women, and our children lie down to sleep by the roadside without fear of harm. From that moment on, non-combatants were protected under his sacred kapu. Under Kamehameha, the old chiefs abandoned their constant warring, and the king solidified alliances through strategic marriages, including one to the 12-year-old Keopuolani, the exalted daughter of his slain enemy, Kawalio. The people of the islands, now united, paid tribute, cultivated the land, and fished in tranquil waters, leading to an era of peace and prosperity unlike any seen in centuries. Yet, despite these years of abundance, the king's desire to rule Kauai remained unfulfilled. The island's new king, Kamualii, stood in his way. As Kamehameha prepared for a renewed assault on Kauai, his armies were struck by a deadly pestilence, likely cholera, which seemed like divine retribution. 3 men were accused of violating the kapu by eating forbidden foods, and Kamehameha, in his wrath, had their eyes gouged out, their limbs broken, and then sacrificed them. In 1810, Kamehameha made one last attempt to conquer Kauai. First, he sent a letter to King George III of Britain, seeking an alliance. The British crown, embroiled in the conflict with Napoleon, was an ally Kamehameha could leverage. He requested a ship and brass guns, while sending the king a sacred feather cloak as a gift. Kamehameha's reach and power had grown immensely. He soon forced the commoners into the mountains to harvest sandalwood, which would be traded to the Americans and sold in China, bringing wealth to the king and his chiefs. Kamualii, witnessing the might of Kamehameha's kingdom, surrendered. The king intended to honor him with a feast, but Isaac Davis warned Kamualii that some traitorous chiefs were plotting to poison him. Kamualii escaped, but the chiefs poisoned Davis instead. Saddened by the loss of his trusted advisor, Kamehameha realized his pursuit of wealth had come at the cost of his people's well-being. As commoners were forced from their farms to harvest sandalwood, they began to starve, leading Kamehameha to reverse his order and invest in food production. By 1819, Kamehameha had become not only a formidable warrior, but also a measured king, bound by the gods to his people. When he fell ill, his many wives and children gathered by his side. His favored wife, Kahumanu, would go on to advise his successor to abolish the kapu system, which had long enforced harsh capital punishment, sacrifices, and restrictions on women. The new rulers would tear down statues of the old gods and adopt Christianity, introduced by American missionaries. Along with them came foreign traders and investors, many of whom brought diseases and dubious intentions to the islands. Yet, despite these changes, the ancient songs, ceremonies, and the spirit of aloha endured among the people. King Kamehameha died in an age of peace, having fulfilled the prophecy that foretold his unification of the islands. Hawaii stood united under his reign. But just as Kamehameha had used his power to shape history, today art has become a powerful tool for preserving wealth. Masterworks allows anyone to invest in high-value art by buying and selling fractional shares. Unlike traditional investments, high-value art is less susceptible to the volatility of the market, offering a stable way to grow wealth, especially in these turbulent times.